So this is going to be we can't access. Okay. This is going to be the first podcast in which we have two technologically challenged individuals. No, Mike, you did pretty good this time. Well, gentlemen, it has been a little bit in terms of trying to get this squared away. And the only excuse that I know of why we couldn't square this away is that you both hunt way too much.
Not enough.
Well, you're hunting way more than me when I get an email back saying, well, Bob's going to be out for 3 weeks because he's hunting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Michal Arnette, welcome back to the Blood Origins podcast. I'm sure this podcast is going to trend the same way as the last one did. Good, honest, hard-hitting discussions and conversations, because the topic we're going to discuss is could be controversial. You know, people have opinions on this one specifically. And Bob Bourland, is it Bourland? Bourland, totally
Yep.
messed that up. Bob Bourland, sorry.
That's all good.
Welcome to the Blood Origins podcast. This is your initiation podcast to Blood Origins.
I'm sure it'll probably be my first and last, but we'll see, I guess.
Yeah, let's introduce each other yourselves. So let's start with Mike. Mike, introduce yourself, please.
I'm Michal Arnette, and just a bow hunter.
Go by Tall Tines Archery on Instagram.
I build Tall Tines Archery, so custom recurves and longbows. And before that, I just a bow hunter.
Should have got you to build a bow for our silent auction for our conservation event.
Well, I've given bows to auction events, so
Next year we got you, okay?
yeah, hit me up. I got to decide. One year I gave away 4 or 5. Decided I have to do 2, only 2. I gotta prioritize. Maybe
Well,
maybe I can make more money in other stuff, and then I can just donate a few bows, right?
Yeah, for sure. Bob, introduce yourself.
Yeah, Bob Bourland. I'm also just a bow hunter. I do volunteer for the Traditional Archers of Oregon. I'm involved with them as their field governor, and the Compton Traditional Bow Hunters. I'm the chair of the hunt committee. So my spare time, I do that stuff. Yeah.
Both are avid traditional bow hunters.
Yep. Yeah, I've been bow hunting since I was 12. I'm unfortunately 43 now, so it's been a long 30 years, I guess.
You have been traditional bow hunting since you were 12?
Off and on, yeah. Yep. Since I was a little kid. So.
And today that is all you do, is trad bow.
Yep.
Michal Arnette, that's all you do, trad bow?
I wouldn't say all I do, but it's what I love to do. Yeah. So, I went on my first black powder hunt this year with a percussion black powder. So, traditional black powder, not much. So we'll get into that maybe a little bit.
Well, why don't you just start there? You know, why are you putting yourself into this position to just be working with a traditional type weapon?
Because I feel like it makes me be a good hunter, because it limits my effective range more than anything else. And in some aspects, I enjoy the skill and the knowledge that it takes to use those weapons. And I value the interaction with the animal. I value the challenge. That's a little cliche, but I want to watch animals as close as possible and be limited as much as I can ethically be limited within within reason. I'm not opposed to any form of hunting though. So
Okay.
I just took my wife to Colorado, and she shot her first antelope with a rifle, stocked within 130 yards, and to her that was hard, you know. But we also got it done within 4 hours of the hunt beginning. So sometimes if you make it, I like a hunt to last just a little
Okay.
bit. Yeah.
Bob, is that similar reasons for why you walk with a trad bow?
I think, mine's a little different. I feel like I grew up, I think I'm not as like earthy and as Mike, I would say. Like I grew up pretty redneck. When I was a kid in the 80s, all my dad and uncles, I mean, they road hunted and shot at deer out of trucks. I mean, a pretty hillbilly family. And for me, it was as I was a little kid, I was ate up by hunting and bow hunting specifically, because of all my uncles hunted and in the 80s out west for mule deer was incredible. I mean, I just remember I mean, it was just Shangri-La. So for me, as soon as I could read in the late 80s, I read every hunting magazine, every article, and every bow hunter and traditional bow hunter. And I always was, for some reason, just pulled to the traditional side. It just seemed like it was so much harder. And, how are these guys like Paul Schaefer? I mean, he's killing a grand slam of sheep with a traditional bow. Like, yeah, it's cool Chuck Adams doing it, but man, it's so much different. And so I always was kind of like Paul Schaefer was my hero growing up, and I was always pulled to that. But there was kind of a moment for me. Like I said, I tinkered with recurves and longbows. Obviously, when I was a kid, I mean, we shot like willow bows as
Mm-hmm.
3-year-olds, but off and on, I hunted with a trad bow through my teens, and when I got into my late teens, it'd be the late '90s. I had a good friend of mine who wanted to go bow hunting, and he was a great athlete, and real good hand-eye coordination. So I'm not saying anybody could do this, but I remember I always shot fingers with a compound, and the releases were all the new thing, and I'm like, well, I don't know how to do that stuff, so I'll take you to the archery shop and have Ron, the old guy, set you up. So we go in, Ron sets him up, and this is the guy I've gone to the same archery shop for years. He sets them all up with the release and all the gadgets of the day, which are nothing compared to now. And we go home, and here I am, a kid who's done nothing but shoot bows and arrows since I could literally walk. I mean, I used to get up before school and shoot my bow. Um, and I am no joke, in a couple hours, he could shoot as good as I could at 30 yards. And I was just like, and I just remember just to myself right then saying, like, this is not good. You know, this is gonna, because even at that time you heard, if you were followed bow hunting, you knew there was a group of these old trad crusties that were a-holes that were all out there just saying the compound's going to ruin the future of bow hunting, and there's going to be no hunting left in 30 years. And I was always like, whatever, like, I love those guys and they're awesome, but I was a kid and I didn't realize what was happening until then. And then from that day on, I was like, this is not going to be good for the future. So for me, like, the aesthetics of it, there's just something about not having a bunch of metal and pulleys and you gotta, yeah, it's got some fiberglass in it, but you're not, your bow and arrows are pretty similar to what we've been doing for thousands and thousands of years. And I think there is like a DNA connection that's just way more, when you get to kind of the philosophical side of traditional archery. But for me, what really flipped the switch was just the practical side of, wow, if if we don't start, if we don't get more people doing this, then our opportunity, like, those guys are right. Like, what's going to happen in the next 20 years? So that was more of a reason why I picked it up totally, because I really enjoyed shooting a compound with fingers, and I did it for years, and it was it was accurate, it was effective, and I was good at it. So I didn't really want to switch, but I just felt like I had to.
Do you
So
feel like, Bob, I'll ask this to you and then Mike, you can follow on, but do you feel like, I would say, and maybe me being one of them, and maybe there's fault here, but I want to hear your opinion, that there is a perception, moniker, perspective, that trad bow hunting, you are setting out from the outset with the full knowledge that you will be less efficient, less effective, harvest less in that method of hunting.
oh, for sure, it's a lot harder all the way around. I think it's a it's a you're putting a huge distance limitation on yourself. You're putting shot opportunities. There's certain angles that we just can't take that compound guys now are just crushing. The ability to hold your bow at full draw for an elk hunter, it's worth 150 yards. I mean, it is so hard to get an elk within traditional bow range and draw at the right time and not have them sense what's going on. Like, yeah, you're definitely, it's definitely a lot harder. That's for sure. There's no doubt about it.
Mike?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. In fact, I remember sitting in a tree. I think it was 2 years after I decided that I wanted to try traditional archery, and I killed a few deer with a compound. And there was a part of me that what Bob was saying, I saw that coming as well. At 17 years old, I saw bow hunting heading in a very different direction and attracting different people. Not that's always a problem, but yeah, I mean, I remember sitting in that tree thinking, can I even do this? Is this even possible? How do I get within 15 yards of a deer? I can't do it. I can get to 25. I've been to 30. I've been to 30. I remember counting like 20 sometimes in that season, thinking, what? How do people do this?
Mm.
And what it was, and now I kill, many deer a year, or I passed many, even more. And the difference was I didn't understand the animals I was hunting, and I had to learn that. And like I said, at an very intimate level. So, and I was 18 years old.
Sure. Mike, when you started talking about trad hunting, I wrote it down. You said it makes me a good hunter. And let's start with the controversy.
Yes.
Does that make everybody else that doesn't do it not a good hunter?
No, I would say no. I don't think there is and I don't want to come off in this podcast like I mean I don't.
Same.
My whole family still hunts with compounds, and they, like I meet guys in the field, I help them out. Like I am not what people think when they hear me talk. Like I just think that they don't really. There is some compound hunters that pick up a traditional bow and they still just crush it, right? But I think they just haven't put in as much for the most part. It's not that they're bad hunters, it's that they haven't put in the time. Like Michael said, like Michael wasn't a bad hunter back then. He just had to put in more time and and you get there. I don't know how to explain it, but
Sure.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say. The reason I would say that the answer would be yes is because to me the measure of a hunter is not animals tagged necessarily, and to some people it is, or even the status of those or size of those animals tagged. To me, the status of a hunter depends on your understanding of the animal that you pursue. And so, am I better or smarter than anyone? No. And it's a whole new learning experience when I get to a new species in a new place. We could talk about that. But I was forced to learn at just such a deep level. And so
I want to make sure that you're not saying, and maybe you are, but I hope, not I hope, you're not looking down your nose at other hunters that do it a different way.
I certainly make every effort not to.
Okay.
But sometimes I do just a little bit.
Yeah, and look,
it's hard not to at times, and that's what I was getting at too. It's like I'm not like I treat you do a great podcast, and that's what you do, Robbie, is you're getting new hunters, you're promoting hunting in a positive light to all sorts of people that, haven't been there. And that's the same thing I'm doing when I have a traditional bow and I run into a guy in the wilderness and he's got a compound. I'm not an a-hole. I'm a nice guy. I'm promoting, and I've had guys that I've hunted with for several days, and then they're just like, well, why do you do that? And I'd be like, well, why do you hunt with a compound instead of a rifle? And they give me the reasons. And I'm like, it's the same reasons, just tenfold, and then by the end of the hunt, they're like, oh, I get it. And I'm going to try one, most of the time they don't, 'cause it's really hard. But I guess that's kind of the same place I'm sure Michael's at, it's like
Well, I think this is the key. In my brain, and I'm not a trad bow hunter, so you have to in the trad bow if you decide to pick up a trad bow, you have made a conscious decision that the goal, and maybe you guys can help me here because I'm not a trad bow hunter. The goal is still to kill an animal. Every single time you go out, that's why you hunt. Okay? But the chances of you killing an animal are much, much, much less. And so because of that reason, I guess the goal is to kill an animal, but the objective is different. Your objective really at the outset is, as Mike has interpreted, it's more of, I value more of a deeper connection in understanding the animal, the behavior, the environment, and getting as close as I possibly can to get to an opportunity of the goal.
And I would say, we've talked about traditional bow hunting, which is what we love, but this applies to any limitation on the equipment of any weapon to a certain extent. So this applies to rifle hunters who hunt with open sights. That cuts their range effectiveness hundreds of yards. And I'm no real judge of that, but their ethical range could have been 700 and now it's maybe 300, maybe even 200. And the same with muzzleloading equipment. When I went on my elk hunt, and part of the reason I did it is because I just wanted to experience a different type of avid traditional hunter than myself. It's not my thing, but I really enjoyed and gained a lot of respect for people that use flintlock and percussion or other primitive muzzleloading equipment. And I hunted in a state, Colorado, that does not allow scopes on muzzleloaders. And so I didn't want to just talk about bow hunting or just traditional bow hunting. I want to talk about this idea that limiting the equipment via limiting effective range can drastically not only improve opportunity by allowing more people into the field with the same management objectives, potentially, but it can also improve their experience because they may be able to see more animals with the naked eye, because the animals are not being taken at such long ranges, and they're able to learn how to get close. To value and this is what it really boils down to: bow hunting, and especially traditional bow hunting. They value, when you limit yourself at that level, you value those animals' instincts. You value those animals' senses. And so in a way that it wouldn't value those senses or habits if you go to a ranch in Colorado and hop out of the truck and shoot a pronghorn from 600 yards, which is how I would wager a large percentage of pronghorn are shot.
Mm-hmm.
Bob? Is there anything wrong with that? No.
Mm-hmm.
And I do want to be careful that I don't have ill feelings about somebody that does that.
No. To me, it's a value. There's different values associated with the person's desire to hunt. Bob, anything you want to add to what Mike said?
Yeah, I think, and this, like I said, might tick some people off, but I think that everything Michael was talking about, if you ran into a bow hunter before the invention of the compound bow, every single person, that's how they approach their hunt. I mean, look at the old Fred Bear quotes. Every day on the gram, you can see somebody, it's if you're measuring it in the, trophy you take and not the experience, he's got all kinds of quotes about that. That is what bow hunting was supposed to be. And it's changed, over the last 40 years immensely. And so and like Michael said, with the opportunities, our opportunities out west are dwindling because our success rates are shooting through the roof. We got overcrowding and overharvest, and over-the-counter elk hunts, they're almost gone. And that's happened in the last 6 years. And for somebody who has grown up doing it and hunting every western state, I mean, I've hunted all of them besides Washington, I think. And it hurts to see it go, and go so fast. And I think we have some good solutions to those problems by using some of this, traditional type seasons, and hopefully we start going in that direction, because all we're going to do is keep limiting our tags more and more and hunting less and less. And bow hunters like to hunt a lot. That's what we do.
It seems like a conundrum, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm purposely moving you guys towards what you initially reached out to me about setting up this podcast, okay? What you're intonating, which is a conundrum, and here's why I'll call it a conundrum. What you're intonating here is that because we have become more efficient of a hunter, which is actually the goal of hunting, to take that animal in the pure definition and pure goal of things, as I've described, that is hurting now our opportunity to hunt. Bob?
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. So, it's just simple math, right? There's only so many animals, and when we become so successful and we can shoot so far, you're going to get less opportunities to go in the field. So,
because more animals are being taken.
Yeah. What do we do as hunters? I think we're alluding to the long range podcast you did, and he's fine with going hunting once every 5 or 6 years if he, because he can just go blast something and be done. And that's great, but I personally, and I am not a know-it-all, I could be 100% wrong, but I personally feel like that we will lose hunting if everybody's hunting once or 5 or 6 years there's no way the youth, there's so many things kids can be in now. If you can't go every year and you're not staying up on it, it's just gonna, all these Mule Deer Foundation, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. If you're elk hunting once every 6 years, you think you're going to keep sending your $30 a year to the Elk Foundation and all these things that keep it going, or, supporting Blood Origins to keep it around when, it's just a week out of every 6 years? Probably not. And then we start losing it. So, I mean, obviously the technology's there and a lot of guys like to do that stuff and shoot long range. I got buddies that do it. And I don't think it's going to go away, but we have to understand, like, all right, that's fine, but you're only going to get a hunt once every so many years. But let's keep, these primitive areas open for people that can hunt every year, make it harder. It's just a discussion that I think, however we do it, we need to be careful because, we want to keep this thing around, which is what, is what your podcast is all about. Keeping the hunting tradition alive. And especially when you talk about traditions, I mean, like I said, I grew up going elk camp every year, deer camp. It was my whole family, aunts, uncles, cousins. I mean, it was the best 10 days of my life every year. And that's gone. Well, mostly because there's no deer left, in Oregon, especially, but it's a shame to lose those traditions,
Mm.
Yeah. So to give you an idea, Bob lives in Oregon. I live in Kansas. Grew up in Oklahoma. I think we can divide the U.S. We're just talking U.S. We can divide it east and west. We have the Mississippi, where it's whitetails. Most of those states need to kill as many whitetails as they possibly can.
100%.
Right? We have where I am, kind of the central. We get a lot of out-of-state pressure, more and more and more and more. And if you're an archery hunter, you've dealt with the most of it. When I started bow hunting, we had not legalized crossbows in Oklahoma. We had around 80,000 bow hunters. Last year we had 140 something. So we've doubled our numbers, which is incredible because people are experiencing that. But then we double the hunters in Oklahoma are shooting approximately 4 times the number of whitetails. These are approximate numbers. You can find them. I can probably give you the exact numbers. And that's not just crossbows and compound bows. So you have 2 aspects of this. You have the popularity because it's easier. And then you have the effectiveness because your range is extended. And in the case of a crossbow, not having to draw a bow is a huge advantage. Any bow hunter would say that's a huge advantage. So, and the other thing I wanted to bring up is, and maybe talk a little bit about, is the viewability of wildlife to the public. And so in Oklahoma, we have a hunt. It's at an Army ammunition plant, and I've hunted it. And the first time I was there, I realized that these deer act very differently. These deer have been only bow hunted. Used to be compound and traditional, now it's only traditional. But they've only been bow hunted, no other weapons really, because it's an Army ammunition plant, for over 20 years, I think maybe closer to 40.
I think it was early or late 80s. I have it somewhere in one of these pictures that they switched to traditional. So it's been traditional only for 30 years, I think we're safe to say.
Yeah, okay. I didn't want to overdo it. But,
yeah, let me look.
So there are 1,400 hunters that go through this. 1,400 tags given out.
86.
Yeah, okay. And then every weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, they have hunts. And even on the last weekends, you can walk up to a deer and it will not run away when it hits about 70 yards. I had deer scent check me and bolt and then stop at 70 yards and just mill around. And so I think one of the things that we don't talk about and sometimes don't even realize, because rifle hunting is available to some people everywhere. Maybe it's limited, maybe it's not. We don't realize that if we only bow hunt animals, those animals over time start to develop a new safety bubble, shall we say, right? And if a traditional bow hunter can shoot 25 yards ethically, 30 yards maybe. So if 60, 70 yards is with a traditional bow, where that safety bubble is for those deer, the compound bow we can kind of extrapolate. And so there's some benefit in both bow hunting and traditional bow hunting to where wildlife is more viewable to the public.
That army munitions example, you don't believe that it has to do with the fact that the only people they see are army? I would assume this is a private facility, fenced off. They only see army people driving around every so often.
Yeah,
that's just maybe one of the reasons why the deer are so calm.
I would have thought that if I was driving around on the roads and this happened. I would have thought that if 1,400 hunters didn't go through there. I mean, it was hard to avoid people. Like there were a lot of people. You could see people. Like it's just a lot of people. And I've hunted areas where there's a tenth the number of people allowed, but let's just say rifle hunting is allowed. It blew my mind because I never even thought about that being a phenomenon, and I do believe it probably is. Now, would it work exactly that way? And also, we're talking couple dozen different encounters that all, where I'm walking towards deer with my bow, just seeing what they do, in the scent checking thing. I had that happen 3 different times, all of them mature animals, and then I had a really hard time getting within that 30 yards.
Mm-hmm.
That was tough,
Mm-hmm.
So just
what about the I know this was mentioned in that long range podcast, and I know that I think you took offense to it, and I know you did take offense to it, of the idea that you're not as effective. Yeah, you get close to the animal. Oh, sorry, not ethical. That's correct. Sorry, good change of of language. That you weren't as ethical because you guys there's just no way to repeat exactly where that arrow is going, and as such, the wounding rate on animals, even though you're that close, is higher.
You want to go Michael,
ahead,
or you want me to go? Okay,
go ahead, Bob.
Yeah. So we've had a traditional archery deer hunt in our state for over 20 years. It's in the Trout Creek Mountains. Only traditional bows are allowed there during archery season. And then immediately after, 5 days after, the rifle season starts, and there's 50 to 75 rifle hunters. And it's wide open country, and every year they come in and blast 40 deer. And I have not heard of one complaint from a rifle hunter in the last 20-something years about a wounded deer, like not a one. So that's pretty good evidence. And then as far as my own, anecdotal evidence, like I said, I hunted off and on with a compound for probably the first 15 years I bow hunted, and then the last 15 all traditional. And there has been, honestly, there's been less. That's probably more just because I've kind of got away from the redneck side of my family a little more and actually started hunting right. And I got older and wiser by the time I, somewhat, and by the time I went all trad. But I don't want to make a statement that's just completely, nothing to back it up. So I can tell you that's my evidence, and any evidence against it. I know McAllister, Auburn University did a study on that McAllister Army ammunition plant, and they did a study of the compounds before and the trad bows after, and the data. I don't remember the numbers, but it was unremarkable. The difference, the wounding loss.
It was unremarkable.
Yeah, there was
Yeah.
basically no difference. I don't remember the numbers for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that's the only real published study. So, I mean, I could go on and tell stories about this compound guy and that, but I mean, that's just hearsay. So
Mm-hmm.
I obviously don't agree with him if you if you want to go down that road. And those are the reasons why, like I think Michael's the same way. He, spending so much time out there, you don't want to wound an animal. I mean, it's hard. I elk hunt a lot. I think I average one every 3 or so years, and I'm there the whole season usually. Um, and so I think it makes you take better shots. I mean, it sounds crazy, but it does. It's like you've worked so hard for it. If you blow this one, there might not be another one. So you really, really think about each one. And we, if you ever meet a traditional bow hunter, like, or I'll just call them a bow hunter, like they shoot every day. That's all they think about. I mean, they are. You have to. It is an art. Like shooting a bow and arrow is an art. I mean, it's been around for thousands and thousands of years, and it takes a lot of practice. And you're, by doing it every day. And nowadays, I worry about, we've made the compounds easier. I mean, I don't think we can argue that. Not to like talk down, but we made them easy enough that the guys don't have to practice as much. And I mean, I can tell you, I met a guy in Arizona on elk hunt a few years ago, and he killed his bull. He was super busy all summer, and so he had some whiz bang guy at the pro shop set it up. He didn't even have time to shoot it, and he killed a 6-point bull, and I think it was the fourth shot he had taken out of that bow. He himself shot it 4 times. So the fourth shot was the time he killed the bull. So he practiced 3 shots. And so I worry, I have worries about that. And then when you get to the long range stuff, and granted, there's plenty of trad guys that shoot too far. I used to do it, and I'm guilty, like of the same stuff. But man, that the shots guys are taking now, and like I said, I'm in that world too. I know these people. You can't blow smoke because I know them and I know how far they're shooting. I got friends in low places, so you can't tell me they're not. And so that's the other side that's not good. So I do think. I mean, is he right? Are you less accurate? Obviously, you're less accurate, or you would be more successful. I mean, that's why everybody uses a compound. But I do believe that, just the nature of the game, by making yourself practice more because it's so hard, keeping your shots limited, and then the nature of the game taking so much time and effort to get into where you finally get the shot does help. It helps a lot to not, fudge the line. Whereas you shot your bow 5 times and you're like, well, where is the line? You don't even know, so you're not really fudging it, so.
Yeah, I would say. So in the long range hunting podcast, what was the name of that gentleman? Do you remember?
Aaron Davidson.
Aaron Davidson. So he laid a pretty serious
Accusation.
Yeah, accusation. That's the word I was looking for, against the traditional bow hunting community, but also the bow hunting community as a whole. So my wife shoots a compound. I'm happy with her shooting a compound. She shoots 45 pounds. She's extremely ethical with that compound. And so for right now, that's what she hunts with. Now she shoots a traditional bow also. But I think it's really dangerous for I was just astounded that he went that far and laid that accusation on bow hunting, because he is literally taking animals at ranges that it's hard to even decipher if he's hitting them or not. And I'm sure he does an excellent job of that. But I'll give you an example. We go pronghorn hunting. Me and my wife. She stalks within 130 yards of this buck. We practice with the rifle. She'll never listen to this, so thank God. He's pretty competitive, and she's good at anything she does. So we stalked 130 yards. We'd already been on a stalk, and she got to about 200 or 250 maybe, wasn't comfortable. I just said, we can get within 150, let's just get there. I know we can do it. So we had some Elmer Fudd moments on this second stalk. Mostly due to me, because I didn't have a gun chamber and I was trying to be extra safe. So
a bullet chamber. You can't chamber a gun.
Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's not a bullet.
Yeah. Well,
So
you're a trad bow guy, so I have to give you like the
So
anyway, the lingo.
Yeah. So third stalk, we get to 130 yards. She shoots. I can't even tell if she's hit the animal. I'm looking at it with my 10 power Swarovskis at 130 yards. I don't even know.
You couldn't tell that the animal was hit or not?
Not for sure.
Come on, Mike. Okay,
well, I'm a bow hunter, right?
Yo, you got to fix those eyes, man. Those eyes are used to like 30 yards instead of 130.
So, maybe I should have been using Bushnell, right?
No, Bushnell or any binos. You just need good eyes.
So, I can't see that I've shot this animal, but I've got 20 years of experience. I know she shot this animal, right? Why? Because I understand animal reactions, because I've had to, right? Because I got to watch my arrow hit and see exactly how the animal acted. So, my wife's like, did I hit it? I'm like, yes, you hit it. She looks through the scope. She's like, I don't see a hole. It's still walking. Okay? So I'm like, no, you hit it. It beds down. So she's freaking out because she doesn't know if she's hit it. Okay? Now, she's going off my judgment. But how many hunters wouldn't know if they shot an animal? Don't know if they've hit an animal. And I've seen this happen, and it can happen with any equipment. But there's
for sure, it can happen with any equipment.
Absolutely. And so, I'm not going to go say that a rifle is less ethical because, you can shoot 800 yards and maybe you didn't get to the right spot in the canyon and you can't find blood. You know how many times, if you talk to guides, how many times guides will say, when they're shooting at those ranges, they'll say, yeah, I've come up on animals that were like perfect shots and nobody's there. And nobody shows up, and so, but I'm not going to say that rifle hunting is unethical, but he said that traditional bow hunting was less ethical. So that really bothered me. And it's important that we don't play those games as hunters.
Yeah, and that's where we're
under attack. We can't play.
I could sit here and throw stones at the long range guys, but man, we are all in this together. We're all hunters. We want to keep this thing around. And man, I don't, even though I'm a trad guy, it's like, I know guys do it. Do I think it's, like if you ask me personally, like, do I think shooting an animal at 1,000 yards is hunting. I think you're drawing there's some wavy lines in the sand there is, like what's the definition of actually hunting something and shooting something? And we got to be, but that's something I think we as hunters, which we don't do this, we need to have discussions about these things and come up with some solutions instead of, I think a lot of times we if you have anything to say about it, you're just a hater and you're getting blocked. If you have any criticism, you're a hater, and even if you're trying to do it in the right way, like, hey, what's this going to do for our future? I can tell you from, I have a job where I'm a firefighter, so I work in a very liberal city, and I work with very diverse crews, and I get to watch TV as part of my job sometimes while I'm cooking dinner for the crew or whatever. And I mean, every walk of the earth I've worked with, and I'm usually when I'm cooking, what do I like to watch? I got the YouTube or a hunting show on, and I can tell you, you can take somebody off that has not been around hunting at all, and put a show like that on, and they are appalled, absolutely appalled. Whether it's the macho, you know compound guy, or the long range this or that, like they're just like, that's hunting, like. So we need to be really careful, which we're not, about, like that's the kind of stuff we got to watch out for. And so it's hard to not throw stones when nobody's talking about it. So you kind of have to rile it up a little bit, or nobody even talks about it. So um, what's the future look like? That's what I always ask myself. Like, where are we going to be at in 20 years if we don't do something now with, in my opinion, with technology in across all seasons. I'm a bow hunter, but that's where I spend most of my time because that's all the time I have. But muzzle loaders, rifles. If we just keep the cork off and let it flow, where are we going to be in 20 years? Right now, there's 32 states that allow crossbows during archery season. We have air bows trying to get into I don't know how many states. We have compounds that you know there's no let off rule anymore. I don't even know. You hold like, shoot, 100-pound compound hold 5 pounds. I don't know. It's like, man, that's nothing. So like, we have all these rules, and I hope that we as sportsmen and women start looking at it as like, man, yeah, it's great that I can do this and shoot this far, but by doing that, I'm cutting my hunting way down. I only get a hunt once every 5 years. And if we can implement some of these seasons, we've done it in Oregon. Hopefully, Utah passed some restricted weapons definitions last year. Hopefully, we start, looking at these areas and trying to cut back on that stuff a little bit. Otherwise, I can tell you from experience, like I used to be able to draw a Nevada archery deer tag every other year 20 years ago as a non-resident. And now the last one I drew for the same area took me 9 years. So in 20 years, another 20 years, that was 20 years ago, and another 20 years, it'll take me 20 years. So
but you cannot say that Nevada example is all because of technology in hunting.
No.
Yeah.
So, wanted to
here. Let me 1 second, Michael. I got some numbers here. Just while we're
on the ethics thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, I differ from Bob a little bit. I think that bow hunting has a slightly higher risk of wound rate. Probably very slight, but a slightly higher risk. And not only that, but we have this thing hanging out of the animal called the arrow sometimes. And so we have this visual cue that in cases of wounding can be very easily sensationalized, right? And so
And
not
is,
yeah,
yeah.
it very much is sensationalized, and we're going to see more and more of that. So I look to the future, like Bob said. What's the future? I see anti-hunters coming after bow hunting big time in the future.
Well, it's happening in Australia. That's the thing that they're
happening.
targeting because of the bad imagery associated with it.
Yep. Just like they have come after other things. And I see no safety net. I see no personal responsibility to placing an ethical shot in our entire nation. We don't even know what the wounding rates are because we have no way of reporting it, and it doesn't make a difference if you do or not, as far as how much you hunt, when you hunt, and how many animals you take. And so we have a real problem in this entire country over the next 50 years when we start to fight this battle. And we need pictures of arrows hanging out of animals to stop now, so we don't have them, as many of them, in 50 years, because they're going to, they're still using. Do you see the RSPC? Is that what it is? The Humane Society
Humane Society. Humane Society of Australia. So RSPCA in Australia, yes.
Yeah, they're using an image that I think is over 40 years old of a poor deer that was shot horribly. And the backstory on that, I have heard, is that deer actually survived, which it would not have if it were shot in the same place with a rifle, and probably would have been wounded as well. But my point is, at some point, I think we're going to have to, as bow hunters, have a draw blood punch tag policy. It is going to be required of us to do that if we're going to have bow hunting in 50 years. And we need to work towards that. And people say, well, how do you enforce that? You know what? Just like you enforce all of the other laws that are hard to enforce. 80% of people follow them. 20% of people follow them, or 15% of people follow them most of the time. 5% of people don't care, right? And eventually they get caught. So I think it's really important that we work that way as a bow hunting community, especially. And
Bob,
especially
back to the Nevada comment.
Yeah. So I got some numbers that let me.
Well,
I'll give you an example. This is an example. These are the Arizona archery deer, the draw units. And Arizona used to be similar to kind of like Oregon, Most of it's over the counter, but they have I don't know the number, 8 or 10 draw units. So enough to be a good sample size. And this is from 2008 to 2017. So in 2008, there were 1,912 permits issued. And they try to kill, from their management, they're trying to kill around, in the 200s, 200 and something bucks. That's kind of their management through all those units. So in 2008, 1,607 bow hunters were able to hunt. They killed 225 bucks. That's a 14% success rate. So every year they had to keep dropping tags to keep their management up. So in 2017, it went from 1,607 hunters down to 630, and they killed 277 bucks. That's the difference between a 14 and a 44% success rate. And that happened from 2008 to 2017. And you can just see the numbers climb of deer getting harvested and the tags dropping. So that's happening everywhere in bow hunting right now. I mean, that's just a little snippet. And that was 2017. That was 6 years ago. So that's not good. You could have 1,600 people in there hunting every year with 14% success. Instead, you're only able to have 630 guys in there, and they're still killing too many deer. And that's why Oregon had to go to all of our Eastern Oregon elk units are controlled now because of most of them, all the ones with elk in them pretty much, because of overcrowding and overharvest. And I was part of all those meetings. Colorado's slowly ticking out all their units. Idaho's got this first come first serve stuff, and so it's a problem that I think we need to, yeah, yeah. And so, like I said, if it's gone that way, that's not even a snapshot of the last 20 years. And so if it continues the trajectory for the next 20 years, the controlled hunts in Utah. So Utah has like 8 limited entry archery deer hunts, and they're good hunts. I'm not gonna lie, but the success rate on their limited entry deer hunts is over 60% if you take all of them. So 60% of the hunters are killing deer. And I was listening to all the rack meetings in Utah last year because they were voting on those restricted archery definitions. And in the central part of the state, the bow hunters lobbied, and they got a mountain goat hunt. They got some tags, archery tags for mountain goat. And they said, look, we'll be able to have a few more hunters on the mountain. And there was serious talk in that meeting from the biologists about getting rid of those tags because they're killing just as many goats as the rifle hunters. Mm-hmm. And so in the same meetings, you got guys arguing that we don't need these restricted weapon hunts because bow hunting's hard. And then later in the meeting, they're saying we still need these tags for these mountain goats, even though our success rate's the same as the rifle, you know? And I feel like, and right then, that's just a little example of what'll happen when we get to that point is our archery season will just go away. They're going to say this, just like they were trying with that mountain gun hunt. They said, well, you can hunt with a bow with because any legal weapon tag. The general hunts, they're not technically rifle hunts. I think in all the states now you can hunt with a bow during the rifle season. So that's all they're going to do. They're going to say, well, we'll just switch them back, and there went bow hunting, which is really hard for me.
The reason I say that is number one, obviously climate and changes in ecosystem and whatnots do play a factor in population, right?
For sure.
So to me, there's an element there. The other element that... Oh, shit, the thing just went out my fucking brain.
But I can tell you that area in Nevada I was applying for in 2005, they gave almost the same amount of non-resident tags that they do now.
Yeah. The other thing that I wanted to say is this. It just came back into my brain. It came into my brain. Is that, and somebody brought this up to me on another podcast, and I was like, man, it was actually with a guide. Today's hunter, as opposed to 20 years ago. So I'll use my dad as a reference, your dad as a reference. Today's hunter, Michael, you're a today hunter. Bob, you're a today hunter. Is hunting as a part of their life every single day. They are more competent today, both physically, both mentally, both understanding the landscape, understanding animal behaviors. YouTube University is a great thing. Google University is a great thing. My dad, younger versions of us 20 years ago, 30 years ago, that wasn't available. And so to me, that cadre of characteristics is making better hunters, more effective, efficient, ethical hunters. So the deer harvest rate may be 60%, but it may be 60% with a trad bow hunter as well in 20 years, because people are just going to be like, all right, I'll just switch and just, I know what I'm doing. And it just goes up and up and up and up.
Yeah, doubtful. But I get what you're saying, Robbie. And when you look back at like Idaho's, they did a really good graph in their 2014 elk management plan. They started with, they kept data all the way back to the 80s on archery, muzzleloader, and rifle general season. And the rifle was like 20-some%. It was just kind of like do. And then the muzzleloader and archery just climbed up to where they met each other in 2014. But in 1980 or whatever, whenever they started that data, the archery success rate was 3%. And you're 100% correct. I mean, we have Onyx and rangefinders and sweet trucks and side by sides. Like that stuff's not going to go away. But that's where I feel like that's a complete cop out to say, because that's what everybody says. They're just like, well, you can't control it, so let's just let her rip. Like, no, we have to have these discussions. What can we control? We're not going to get rid of rangefinders. I'd love to. We're not going to do it. They're in binoculars. They're in scopes. I mean, they're in everything. Now you can't get rid of rangefinders. You can't get rid of trucks. You can't. So where can we as hunters look at this and say, if we don't control this, we are going to go out of control. What can we control? Well, we definitely can make bow hunting like it used to be and make primitive archery seasons. We can definitely, I think Utah did an incredible job last year. They put together a technology committee, and those guys came up with restricted weapons definitions to hopefully be used in the future of, a traditional bow, which was fought hard by a lot of compound guys, which is hard to see. It's like, man, we're trying to bring more opportunity. And then, you know, um, traditional muzzle loaders and then iron sight rifles. Like these are things like we can do instead of looking at it as there's nothing we can do about it. We'll just let it roll. We have to come up with a solution or it's gone, and that's unacceptable to me as a hunter. It's just completely unacceptable. So hopefully we can, and then in 20 years we'll look back at this, like the steroid days of baseball, right? When McGuire's dropping bombs every at bat, like we'll just be like, yeah, you remember the days when Cam was all juiced up and hunting those ranches and just crushing it? Like, man, that was crazy times as we're all out, around the campfire with our longbows. So hopefully that'll happen, right?
I would add that going back to valuing the animal's abilities and habits and senses, part of this problem is compounded by species. So some species are more easily affected by range effectiveness than others. I'll give you two examples. Well, three. Javelina. I've hunted javelina. They say, well, if you shoot one with a rifle, it's not much. Javelinas don't have long range hearing, smell, well, probably smell, or sight. And, they would be an example, maybe an extreme example of an animal that is really hurt when you can shoot it from even just 100 yards, as far as how effective you can be and how little those animal senses matter in the situation.
Yep, good example.
A less extreme example, but I think probably the best example of this is the North American mule deer. I would put pronghorn in the same, in a very similar predicament, maybe to a lesser extent, where it's just the range effectiveness. That's all it is making the difference. So I've hunted mule deer. I've had 4 or 5 different mule deer tags in now 3 different states. Just drew a Utah tag in the worst winter kill that area that they had. I didn't go. I just ate my tag. That was my biological decision on that. Had to do with time also, so wasn't complete.
Makes it sound better when you say that. You're like, yeah, I'm just doing the right thing.
It made it, yeah. So I didn't go. But I've hunted Colorado, New Mexico, western Kansas, where you can shoot mule deer. I've been within 100 yards of more mule deer than I could count. I've been within 70 yards, which a good shot with a compound is very much effective at 60 yards. Even just a mediocre shot is effective at 50 to 60 yards with a rangefinder and some practice. 70 yards for someone that really practices and knows their stuff. That can be an ethical shot, even 80 or 90, potentially. I've been within 60 to 70 yards of dozens of mule deer. I've been within 40 yards of probably a dozen mule I've been within 30 yards of 3 mule deer. I've been within 20 yards of 1 mule deer. And so mule deer specifically, and that's why Bob keeps bringing up the numbers there, they're one of those species that we really need to look at this for. I would say pronghorn as well. And it doesn't help that we just had terrible die-off, right?
Yeah.
Maybe feral hogs, we never need to look into this for. In the southeast.
or land carp, whitetails. Yeah, in Colorado as an example, I believe, let me look on this, but 30 of their units, is it 40% success? Yep, 40% success. They have 30 of their hunt management units for deer have over a 40% archery success rate.
And the reason is, mule deer have adapted for eons of time against their main predator, which is mountain lions. Adult mule deer, that's their main predator. And how does a mountain lion hunt? It gets within 60 yards, and then it goes, right? And so it used to be that mule deer, and you talk to old timers, they would call it, they have a wolf zone, is what one guy called it. Basically, that evolutionary bubble of a mule deer is much smaller because of their adaptations to specifically mountain lion predation. And now they don't have that same wolf zone. but yeah. So,
well, look, gentlemen, you wanted to come on here and state your case for trad bows, and you've stated it in a way to say, there's lots of different ideas around saving hunting. Okay? And from your perspective, it's not like a saving hunting narrative PR perspective, which is what we address hunting through, right? Our lens. You're like, hey, we're hunters that are recognizing that we like to hunt, and the opportunity to hunt is diminishing. And there is a solution here in our eyes, which is switch some units, some areas, some tags, some seasons to a trad bow only mechanism,
or
by which
a lot percussion rifle or a rifle without a scope. Go ahead though. Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're right. And such with the exact goal, correct me if I'm wrong, with the exact goal of reducing the percentage chance of harvest of that animal. Head nods all around.
Yep.
Fair enough?
Yeah.
I would say, while we're battling for the heritage of hunting together with differing views, that's okay.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. There is an aspect of value in both the heritage, whether it's the heritage of the fur trappers who came across the West and trapped, or the heritage of the riflemen that came and shot all the buffalo, or but reformed and later saved the buffalo, right? Or it's the tradition handed down to each of us, no matter what our ancestry, of archery and bow hunting. We've had archery and bow hunting for, I think, 12,000 years, they estimate. They argue over it.
Yeah, they used to say 5,000, and I think they found some cave paintings that were 15 to 30,000 or something recently that were really surprising to them, supposed to their carbon dating. I don't know how accurate that is, but for sure, the tradition, I know things are never going to be like they were, and we can't, live in the past, but there's something so incredibly pure, and it's going to sound nerdy, but carrying a bow out in the woods is just like, there's just nothing like it for me. I don't know what it is. And I think it's just thousands and thousands of years, like there's so many things that have changed in the last 200 years. You think about the continent we live on, especially if you have some Native American ancestry, and it's like we have changed from that to this in such a short amount of time that it messes us up. Some of us really have a hard time with it, and that's why we're trying to get out in the woods all the time. And to get rid of that, that's not good, I don't think.
Well, look, go ahead, Mike.
Well, I know it don't lie. I think we need to think about what natural hunting is also, because it is, in the grand scheme of evolution, we have these mule deer that have adapted to mountain lions. We have other species that have adapted. These species have not adapted to be hunted at 800 yards.
Maybe they will.
Maybe they will. Okay.
Then, like we said, we'll never see them.
Yeah. But also, never in the history of the world have all of the whitetail or half of the whitetail been harvested within a 2-week period during gun season. And so now we're fighting these new diseases like chronic wasting disease. And our enemies they're starting to use science, bad science albeit, against us. How are we thinking scientifically about how we're affecting the evolutionary process? And maybe we should think about that a little bit.
Well, let's not think about it on this podcast, because you're about to open up a can of worms that will last another hour and a half. Listen, I'll say this, and I probably speak for a lot of people, and I apologize. The puppy has just arrived that is now tormenting the hunting dog, so you may hear some growling and whatnot. I have been inspired in this podcast to be like, man, maybe I should try and get a trad bow and pull it back and, get what these guys get. I get it, right? Stop. I get it. But I'm also a very, very still, and unbelievably people know this that follow the podcast, I'm still a very new hunter. And I'm not afraid to say it. I want success. And I want, I'm spending a lot of money. I'm going to places. I'm okay eating tags. I've eaten a lot of tags, expensive tags. But I also want success. And so the idea of taking a trad bow hunting, you've just got to change your mindset that is not, yes, the goal is success, but you are going into the endeavor by saying there's something else to this.
And I'd say the same to bow hunting as a whole. So bow hunting as a whole is that way.
Well, dudes, thank you so much. We should do it again on another controversial topic. Michael always tends to email me when something controversial comes up and goes, hey, I think I want to say something. I was like, all right, Mike, let's go. Let's get you on the podcast.
I think too much.
All right, gentlemen. Thanks.
Thanks, Robbie.